City Council meets today to consider several big issues, including two multi-million-dollar settlements and a plan to borrow $830 million.
That money will go to maintenance and infrastructure projects.
The borrowing plan coming at a time when ratings agencies downgraded Chicago to just above junk status following that marathon budget process late last year. The downgrade means it costs the city more money to borrow money. Critics say the $830 million Johnson wants the city to borrow will just make the budgeting in the future more difficult. Payment on the principal of the loan wouldn't start until 2045. You can kind of think about it like a credit card bill. If you only pay the interest month after month, you will end up paying a lot more for that initial purchase.
Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about Brandon Johnson, one of the most unpopular mayors in the entire country. Of course, he is the mayor of the city of Chicago, who recently decided to put forward a proposal to spend $830 million that they borrowed, supposedly on infrastructure. However, the aldermen in the city of Chicago are absolutely outraged by the terms of this loan, because it turns out they won't start paying the principal on said loan until the year 2045. They will only be paying interest on this $830 million loan for the next 20 years. And by the way, when you crunch the numbers, when you do the math, what you ultimately end up discovering is that this loan will cost over $2 billion just for $830 million right now. Now, of course, it is pitched as a critical infrastructure bill that we absolutely need 100% in the city of Chicago. But the fact of the matter is, those of you who are familiar with my channel know that Brandon Johnson was trying to borrow money at an extraordinarily high interest rate in order to pay off the teachers union, to which he is a member of. And guess what? When combing through the terms of the bill related to this loan, what we end up finding out is that this scheme against the taxpayers actually has a tucked away provision in it that says that they might be able to divert the money from infrastructure and give it to, guess who? The Chicago Teachers Union. So we're going to break this down. We're going to talk about this. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
Some are saying this is the way we've always done it. Well, frankly, this is exactly why we shouldn't continue doing it this way, because that's how we came in this mess.
There's no doubt the city of Chicago has infrastructure needs, but there is a clear divide on how to pay for them.
Investment is vital, but the proposed debt structure is fiscal insanity.
So right there, they end up showing you a member of the Chicago Board of Supervisors who's obviously pointing out that, yeah, even if this is standard practice in the city of Chicago, that is how we got into a fiscal disaster in the first place. And by the way, somebody told me that the city of Chicago actually leased out their parking meters for something like a one-time payment of $1 or $2 billion in order to cover a short-term budget gap. And they did that lease for 99 years. So we see bad decision after bad decision made for instant gratification for the Chicago politicians a lot of times, and it makes sense at some point in time for you to say enough is enough, especially when you look into the provisions of this particular loan and you realize that all the complaints about how the infrastructure needs repairing, how the infrastructure needs updating, are just superficial in order to make sure Brandon Johnson can get control of this money, because he wants to be able to divert it to illegal immigrants and, of course, to the teachers union. If you don't believe me, let me pull up the exact provision that has been highlighted on twitter.com for you to worry about. Now, by the way, the person who discovered this is a man called Austin Berg, so I want to give him credit where credit is due, and he highlights this portion of the bill that would actually secure this loan, and I just want to read it for you so you can understand what the scam is. Now, right after it talks about the new traffic signal installation, intersection safety improvements, and transit facility improvements, Section 4 says loans or grants to assist individuals, not-for-profit organizations, or educational or cultural institutions, or for-profit organizations to further assist other municipal corporations, units of government, school districts, the state, or the United States of America. So what Austin is highlighting right here is that in this $830 million loan proposal being pushed by Brandon Johnson that's supposedly about infrastructure, after they talk about the type of infrastructure that you can allocate this money to in the form of grants and or contracts and or payments, you also have this section right here that says, oh, you can also allocate this to not-for-profits, educational institutions, school districts, to make it clear they state those things twice, or any of these other public or private purposes, meaning that they're borrowing money on the pretense of fixing Chicago's crumbling infrastructure. However, they're granting themselves the permission, if they borrow this money, in order to spend it on other things, including but not limited to school districts and illegal aliens, because who's administering all the different programs to the migrants in the city of Chicago? You guessed it, not-for-profits, which are expressly listed right there. You can also pay corporations for things like meal services and whatnot that are given to those illegal aliens, and it just goes to show you that if you don't pay attention to your local politics, you are going to be screwed over, because these people have way more influence on your life. They can borrow your city, your state into disaster, again, put the payments off 20 years down the line, and you might not even notice if you're not paying attention in detail, because you might be thinking, you know what, we need those instant infrastructure improvements right now, and paying $2+ billion over the course of 20 years, that's really not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a trade-off when you consider the fact that the improvements to the infrastructure will be a net benefit for us over the course of that 20 years. But guess what? Those infrastructure improvements aren't going to happen. This loan money is going to be given to the teachers union, which Brandon Johnson is still a member of and is just on leave from, as he is the mayor of Chicago, which means it will go in part into his pocket.
On Wednesday, Chicago City Council was set to vote on Mayor Brandon Johnson's borrowing plan of $830 million for the city. The money would go towards maintenance and infrastructure projects in all wards. The vote did not go through when several aldermen voiced concern over the structure of the loan.
We're making it very challenging by kicking the can down the road for 20 years.
Under Johnson's borrowing plan, the city would start making interest-only payments towards the loan starting in 2027. Payment on the loan's principal wouldn't begin until 2045. That's 20 years from now.
You face a staggering repayment obligation and a past due bill that is double what you originally borrowed.
So look, the reason why politicians love to structure loans this way is because Brandon Johnson will be long gone, and it will be somebody else's problem 20 years from now when this loan blows up on them, and of course, when the infrastructure payments aren't actually there. And to be clear, Brandon Johnson looks like he's going to be gone in the next election cycle, so he might be out of office by the time they're even starting to pay the interest on the loan in 2027, but the man might have further political aspirations as the governor of Illinois, and you might think that's ridiculous, you might think that's absurd, but the man has a giant ego. He probably thinks he can go governor, senator, and then president of the United States, calling everybody a racist along the way, and this is what they do in order to say that they balanced the budget in their time. They found money for infrastructure and for education while they were in office, not mentioning the fact that all these different loans that have been put off 20, 30 years or whatever are going to blow up on the future generation, are going to hamstring the politicians there, and it's really unfortunate. But to be clear, this is standard political fare. Brandon Johnson isn't doing anything unique. It just so happens his popularity is so low and so in the dirt, he's finally being called out for it. And don't make any mistakes about it, the Chicago aldermen did not all of a sudden become a fiscal discipline experts or anything of the sort. They're just responding to the fact that the man who's pushing for this stealth payoff for the teachers has no political capital, and like rats, they're jumping off that sinking ship.
Others in favor of the borrowing plan say this is no different than what's been done in previous administrations.
Any delay in the passing of this bond deprives Chicagoans of the infrastructure they rely on every day.
They argue this loan would help wards in desperate need of repairs and upgrades.
When it's time for the South and West Side to see stuff in this bond issue, let's pump the brakes.
With no vote, the matter was tabled.
So if you guys don't know, the south and west side of Chicago, that's where there's a lot of black people. Brandon Johnson is from the west side of the city of Chicago, or at least he lives there, and his political origins are traced back to over there. So what they're saying right now when they're like, oh, this is just how we did this for all the time, so there's nothing different, and then that's followed up by another person saying, oh, all of a sudden you guys are against this, when it's the south and the west side, he's accusing them all of being evil white racists. He's saying, shut up with your evil white racism and give the money to the black people.
We're all for bonding, we get that, but the terms of this bond are ridiculous.
Now, I give credit to that member of the Board of Supervisors because he is a black person. He's wearing what looks like to be the African cloth thing with a bunch of other people, and he's saying, look, I'm in favor, obviously, of funding my district, of funding my ward. I'm in favor of the south side and the west side. I'm not anti-black or anything of the sort. It's just the terms of this loan are ridiculous. So a lot of people are pushing back against Brandon Johnson, and this this just makes sense. And again, the temperature is rising in the city of Chicago because Brandon Johnson has diverted resources, at least in the minds of the black voters that make up his base, away from them and to the illegal immigrants. He's talking about how much he's going to fight back against the evil orange man, while at the same time he has to borrow them into devastation in order to give some kickbacks to his own base because he put the illegal immigrants first. So Brandon Johnson in a lot of trouble right here. And obviously he's still trying to sneak through his pay increase for his teachers, for the union that he is still a part of, so that way he can get paid more once he leaves office. And it's absolutely disgusting in every possible way. And I'm glad that the public pressure against this ended up tabling this for the time being. But the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, it is only a matter of time before the city of Chicago takes a bad loan on terrible terms that has enough giveaways in order to satisfy the current members of the Board of Supervisors, but definitely will put the city of Chicago in a huge financial hole.
Meantime, aldermen also debated reducing Chicago's speed limit from 30 to 25 miles per hour.
Everybody wants to go to heaven. Nobody wants to die. So how about we slow these cars down?
The ordinance was struck down as aldermen against it argued it would cause a surge in traffic tickets and disproportionately impact minority communities.
So yeah, they also apparently debated lowering the speed limit from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour, and obviously it's the city of Chicago, so the reason why this was struck down is because black people speed more, and they said this would just be a way in order to ticket black people and Hispanic people disproportionately because they're acting poorly disproportionately in the city of Chicago. But at least it makes me a little bit happy that they're fighting back against this Vision Zero initiative, because they essentially lower the speed limit to 25 miles an hour. There's no way you can make back-to-back lights at that speed going on the streets of these major cities, and then they put in those speed cameras that end up snapping you and billing you $50 for a ticket on your way trying to drive through your day-to-day life, and it is actually incredibly annoying, and I understand why certain people are against it. That being said, whether or not it's racist to have this, to me, is absurd and ridiculous in every possible way. If you drive under the speed limit, you won't get the ticket regardless of what race you actually are. Now look, I'm going to pass this question off to all of you out there in the audience. What do you think about this loan as pitched, as sold to the Chicago taxpayers, where it's $830 million supposedly for infrastructure, and they're not going to start paying interest until 2027, and they're not going to start addressing the actual principal on the loan until 2045, which by the way means that they will pay well more than double, north of $2 billion, in order to have this $830 million right now. In addition to that, I want to know what you think about that stealth provision in there that allows them to divert this money from this infrastructure loan in order to pay for things like the public schools, like illegal immigrants. Do you think that was put in there by accident, or that was obviously intentional by Brandon Johnson? Again, all your thoughts in the comments below. As per usual, if you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the disaster that is the city of Chicago. Till next time.